Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's Employee Town Hall. I'm Megan Whalen, Associate Director of Communications in the Division of Marketing and Communications. My pronouns are she and her. I'm going to be moderating the question and answer period shortly, but before we get to that, I'd like to ask our President, Dr. Vianne Timmons, to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I want to begin by acknowledging that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of the province. I will also mention that we're bringing our Indigenous framework that was approved by Senate to the Board of Regents on Thursday, so I'm really pleased with that. Joining me today are Mark Abrams, Provost and Vice President Academic, Neil Bowes, Vice President Research, and Ken Decker, Vice President Administration and Finance. I will mention that Jeff Kesson has already done town halls with the Grenfell campus, and so has Glenn Blackwood with the Marine Institute, but both are here and present if needed. So I want to acknowledge that they are attending. Everyone's ready to answer questions or respond to any comments you might have. And this is our third town hall, and I always learn a lot from the frank and open conversations we have. You know, we put this event together because I know this is a challenging time, and many of us are finding it really difficult. It's not business as usual, as I've said before. COVID was in our homes this time. Hundreds of employees have been tested and self-isolating over the past month, and many had family and friends who tested positive, or managing elder care, homeschooling, and their personal and professional responsibilities. I know you're tired. I also know that everyone is thinking about kindness, and we're being kind to each other, being kind to our students, and most of all, you need to be kind to yourselves. It's not always easy to do. I know many people are feeling the weight of a year of pandemic restrictions, but showing empathy and choosing to be kind is something we do have control over, and it does help. You know, I will mention that about a week and a half ago, I woke up in the morning and I was so discouraged. I have to tell you, I thought, what have I accomplished since I've been here? I haven't met people in person. I haven't walked the campus and chatted with you. I had one of those really, really challenging days, and I know that all of us have had that. I also want to mention that I did get an email today from someone who said that they really find it challenging working at home because there are no limits on the time. When they start, when they finish, the blurring between home and work has been a real challenge for them. So I'm going to ask everyone, and particularly the leaders who are on this call, to think about that with employees. I know that the time gets blurred with myself. I was on a call, I got on a call the other night at 9:30, and at 11:15, I was done. So we have to let's try to respect the workday, even though we're working remotely. I also want to say to everybody, you are aware that Jeff Kesson has accepted a position as president of University of Regina. I had nothing to do with that. I know that you're all thinking, how did that happen? And it wasn't a swap. It truly, and we're so pleased for Jeff, and I want to say congratulations to him. The Grenfell campus was, I met with them, and they have given me phenomenal input in terms of a way forward, and I'll be working on that in the next little while. The provost position will be going to the board this Thursday, so stay tuned. We'll have an announcement hopefully shortly. And I know yesterday was International Women's Day, and I want to acknowledge that the stress of the pandemic on women is significant in our community, and we have to be aware of that. And I will say that I had a town hall for women, and I will do another one later in the term. But I want to say that we are aware of the challenges are exacerbated when you're at home and you have family care and elder care and children care. And I know that for the women on the call, you often carry more of the challenge, more of the burden. So now, in saying that, I am going to listen and learn from you and look forward to hearing your frank and honest comments. I can't promise to fix everything, or I can't even promise to fix anything, but I do promise to listen and take your concerns seriously. We're in this together, and together we will come out of it. Now I'll turn it back to Megan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Timmons. So for today's event, we're going to try something new. In an hour, we can only hear from so many people, and we wanted to try to make this event a little bit more interactive. So Darcy and I are going to be launching a few polls throughout the hour to give everybody a chance to participate. So Darcy, do you want to try launching the first question? This is just to help us get to know who's in the room with us, if there's faculty, staff, leaders, postdoctoral fellows, retirees. Now, you don't have to answer any poll questions. You do have a minute. And if you can't see all of the words, if you hover on the line between our faces and the white window, you'll be able to pull it over so you can see it all. So everyone will have a minute to answer, and it'll just help us know who we're talking to today, and there'll be a few more questions. Didn't realize when I did this that I'd have to talk for a whole minute in between to fill in, but I'll do my best. So we have...
Megan, for Senate, we did this, and we went to 30 seconds, and it worked really well. So
okay.
So just a tip, we had a minute at first and we didn't need that amount of time. So if you can adjust, that might help.
I'll leave that to Darcy to determine if he can, and if not, maybe he can just manually stop it after 30 seconds or so. But we've done a good job because we're at 59, 60 seconds, and Darcy will be able to show us the poll results, and we'll all be able to see who's here with us, I think. Here we go. So we have mostly staff, some faculty members, 44 leaders here, which is wonderful, and 74 folks didn't respond. And of course, I do want to acknowledge that we have people who are logging on via a YouTube link for a view-only experience, so we don't have those. But it's good to know that so many of you took the time to be with us today. So if you've attended a town hall before, you already know how you can submit your questions, but I'll run through it again. There's a Q&A function similar to the polling function that you just used. And you can write your question in there. The limit for characters is 250, so please try to keep your questions short and try to avoid breaking them over multiple submissions, because that makes it really hard for me to read. And I'll be reading those questions or comments out to the panelists on your behalf. You can also use the Q&A function to let me know if you'd like to come on screen and share your thoughts directly with panelists. This is really good if you have something to say that is hard to fit into 250 characters, but I do ask that if you come on screen to try to keep it short so that we can hear from as many people as possible. And I'll also ask our panelists to keep their answers short for the same reason. And just for some final ground rules, our panelists aren't able to answer questions about ongoing disciplinary issues, any matters before the courts, or any individual staffing or HR matters. And also, please don't ask any questions that might infringe on someone else's privacy. Now, Darcy, can you launch our second poll question, hopefully for 30 seconds? In this one, we just want to check in on how you're doing. So the question should be appearing shortly. And what we're asking here is, option A, happy face emoji, I'm doing good. Option B, straight face emoji, I'm all right. And 3 is our sad emoji, you're struggling. Now it's up to you if you're responding or not, but this will just kind of do a quick temperature check so that we can see. Like Dr. Timmons said, she's had some bad days. I know last week I had a day that was quite a struggle. This week I think I would choose A, but all answers are okay, and it's just good to acknowledge that not everyone is doing well. So we're at about 30 seconds there. And if Darcy has ended the poll, and it'll just take a few seconds and we'll be able to see the results. Most people are okay. 60 people are struggling. 124 are good. So Dr. Timmons, are you surprised by those results on how people are doing?
No, I'm not surprised. I recognize, I'm pleased that 124 of you say you're good and 191 of you say you're okay. For the 60 that are struggling, it's interesting because I mentioned I was last week also. So remember that that's okay too. It is tough and it is hard, but if you're really struggling, please reach out and get some help. And I did mention we have a lot of leaders on this call. Please recognize that that workday can be long if we don't respect the boundaries of a normal workday, and I want to encourage you to do that.
Great, thank you. So now let's get into the questions that were emailed. Before we do, just want to remind everyone that we're taping this session so that we can share it afterwards for folks who weren't able to join us. So our first two questions came in from Allison McNeil for Mr. Decker. And she said, for many employees, working from home during the pandemic has proven that a permanent work from home arrangement can be just as productive and rewarding as working on campus, but more personally accommodating in many aspects of work and home life. What is the status of the work from home program, and when can employees expect to have a policy to guide a work from home proposal?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. I think work from home is a very important part of the future of Memorial. I think we'll see a lot more people working from home as we move down the road and get to know what all this has meant in terms of the pandemic. Right now, we had started a number of work from home pilots. So we had set up some groups of people who had requested to work from home and had worked with their dean or director or vice president to establish a pilot program. So a fairly, not a simple process in some ways. There are legal implications of permanent work from home. We had to do some ergonomic assessments. We had to do IT assessments. We had to ensure there's proper security set up, those kinds of things. So those pilots were established. There was a committee set up to work with them to establish the pilots. And we also are looking at setting up, and we've established, I guess, a group who will monitor and evaluate the work from home pilots. Problem was, just as we set it up, everybody went back from home. So to do a proper work from home pilot, it was intended that you'd be able to compare the differences between working from home and working on campus, where you had people in both situations. So we're a bit delayed in that. So essentially, we've sort of delayed those pilots, particularly the evaluation of them. We do expect to get them back on track when we get back to campus. Now, when we get back to campus is obviously a big question right now, question none of us can really answer. And something we just had to, I guess, for now, speculate on. So the pilots were established. Groups who are working from home, I guess, continue to work from home like all the rest of us, but there's no formal evaluation set up yet. The intent was we do a 12-month evaluation. Once that process has worked itself through, we expect to be able to move on to other groups and potentially other individuals where it would make sense for the organization and for the employee to work from home. So that's where we are right now. Unfortunately, we're in a bit of a pause, a bit of delay, but hopefully we get back on track later on in the year.
Thank you. And another question for you, Mr. Decker. For those employees who have submitted requests for workplace accommodation and have not had a response from HR in over a month, what is the status of the review and decision process in Human Resources, and what's the time frame for a response?
Again, similar situation that we're on pause. Most of the, as I understand it, most of the requests for accommodation related to things such as people being compromised from an immune perspective. Obviously, with nobody working on campus, it's a different issue. In terms of when we get back to campus, I expect that's going to be quite a while. If you think back to last year, we were in level 2 for quite a while before we actually brought people back, I think, with several months. Latest information seems to be that we would not get to level 3 to possibly May, and we would probably have everybody in the province who wants a vaccination vaccinated by June. So I'm not sure what the medical accommodation will actually be, if there actually will be a need for one. I expect pretty well everybody in the province will be vaccinated by June. And to be honest, I can't see a scenario at this time where we would be requiring people to come back before then. If we're not even into level 2 by then, obviously we're not going to be there. It seems, based on what I'm hearing in the media, that the medical officer of health is looking at vaccination rates as a way of guiding the province moving through the various levels. I think this past February was a bit of a wake-up call. We're in level 2, things seem to be fine. However, behind the scenes, a variant was spreading fairly rapidly in the community. So I expect that situation is playing heavily on the minds of our public health people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, maybe Mark can speak to the the spring classes and the summer and fall classes. Mark, is that okay, Megan?
Mhm.
Sure, I can talk about spring first. So this was discussed at Senate at our meeting in early February. And for the most part, it's going to be a primarily remote exercise, but some faculties will be coming back on campus. Human kinetics and recreation will be primarily face-to-face in the spring term, and we're going to be continuing with the exceptions that we've been using in previous academic terms. The spring term is a nice transition term for us because we tend not to have very large numbers of students on campus. And so we can bring students back onto campus without really increasing our densities very much. With respect to the fall, I do have a small committee working on details, but our expectation is the fall term will be a primarily face-to-face academic term. It's not going to be like other fall terms, but let's just say it's going to be primarily face-to-face, and we'll figure out what exceptions we need to deal with to accommodate the health situation.
Thank you. And the next question is for you, Dr. Abrahams. Mark Pico says, we've been instructed to be lenient with students because the situation is new to everyone, students and instructors alike. However, is there a worry that we might be becoming too lenient and that our standards might be lowered as a result? I personally have become very flexible with assessments and deadlines, but in some cases, it's clear that I'm doing so for students who have not accessed my course in several weeks. I can't help but feel that this is unfair to students who are working hard to meet deadlines and review course material. Can we get some guidance on this issue?
Yeah, so there's this is a subject that's being considered by CITL. In fact, there is a report that CITL has put together on the stresses associated with teaching. So one of the challenges that we had in the fall term is that we were encouraging faculty to stay away from using final exams that required an online invigilation process. There were a whole host of issues associated with that. So we were encouraging more ongoing assessment. The challenge we had was that the amount of work that was being assigned to students in the fall term was starting to become very, very large. So CITL has put together a document. I encourage you to take a look at it. It's really important to not overload your students, because while you may be doing ongoing assessment, they are seeing a similar thing from all of their other courses. But the main point really is just to be sensitive to the circumstances of your students. Because we're primarily remote, not all of your students are necessarily going to be in St. John's or even in the same time zone. So when assignments are due, you need to understand how that impacts some of your students, especially those who are not living in the province and working on a different time zone. So really my advice is get to know your students, understand the challenges your students are dealing with, and accommodate those main challenges, but please don't lower your standards.
And being empathetic and understanding isn't the same as compromising standards. They're actually separate things. So because you're empathetic and understanding, and you may make accommodations when you feel it's warranted, that doesn't reduce standards. So I'd encourage you to kind of really think about that.
Jonathan Anderson in the Q&A had a comment related to this. He said, I feel like I'm at or over my limit. We are rightly asked to be flexible, accommodating, and kind for students, but I don't feel a lot of extra understanding, flexibility, kindness, or appreciation from students. I'm not sure how to fix this, but Dr. Abrahams, is this something, or Dr. Timmons, you'd like to comment on?
Certainly, I will comment on it. The message is both to students and faculty. Students need to understand that while they're struggling, so too are many of our faculty. And course instructors and staff. And so while we are asking our faculty to be lenient and understanding of our students, so too are we expecting our students to be lenient and understanding of our faculty.
And we communicate that at a number of ways, but we also will be having a student town hall coming up. And I'll make sure, and the provost will make sure to make that point to the students.
Great, thank you. I'm going to get back to some questions that came in from email. These ones are for Dr. Bose from Devin McGrath. And he says, in the event that the Avalon region goes to a lower alert level on Friday, will graduate students who were previously accepted to work under the COVID-19 research framework last year be allowed to return to their labs to continue their research, or will there be further delays?
Thank you, Megan. The the situation is that we're ready to proceed as soon as the province lowers the alert level. So, but that will be done in the way that it was done a year ago, so that the priority initially will be for students who are in the last year of their program and absolutely need to access something, a lab or whatever, to finish a certain task. As the alert levels are lowered further, then students in more junior years would also be allowed to return to their labs as needed, or the resources that they need. So the approach taken will be like it was done last year. Although if you remember last year, actually the province moved very rapidly through 4 and into 3. And so it was probably almost not obvious to the graduate students themselves, because they as the province lowered their alert levels, many were allowed back onto campus to access the resources they needed. But we anticipate being able to do the same this year to allow students back to get the work done that they need to do.
Thank you. And a follow-up question related to that. In the summer of 2020, students who were slated to finish their graduate degrees were promised an extra semester of funding due to the several months where graduate students were unable to access campus. With another month of lockdown under our belt, will the same funding be offered to graduate students who are slated to finish in 2021 after 2 lockdowns where research activities had to be put on pause? So
this question actually overlaps what I'm responsible for, and also the School of Graduate Studies. But I can't actually answer the part about whether funding will be available this year in the same way as it was last year. But what I can say is that the situation isn't quite the same as last year. We've already been in a year of pandemic, and so supervisors in that period have been asked to work with their students to enable graduate students to progress through their programs as they can in the situation that we're in. And I don't know if the Dean of Graduate Studies is online at the moment, but she may want to also comment on this matter. But she can also make the point that there's flexibility being shown by the School of Graduate Studies examination system and so on in assessing students as they come to the end of their programs. So while a research proposal may have said that X, Y, and Z needed to be done, it may be that ABC or X, Y, and A is done instead. And that's definitely a situation that students and their supervisors must work together to enable students to progress as rapidly to completion as possible.
Thank you. I'm not seeing Dr. Supernot in the panelist list, but we can follow up with her after this event and make sure that we get information out to graduate students about that. Oh, I am wrong. I think he's coming up because Darcy is very good at his job. Sorry about that. Dr. Supernot, you'll be, there you go. You are free to speak.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So as Dr. Bose mentioned, I think we are doing the best we can to be flexible with the products of the research, and have developed a COVID impact statement for students to include in their thesis that's going out to examiners. And then to answer the funding question, yes, we will be extending baseline funding for students going forward for 1 semester for those finishing, or those who should have been finishing at the end of this semester. And I anticipate we're going to end up doing that again for the students who are hoping to finish or should have finished at the end of the summer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Darcy, you can change Dr. Supernot's status, and I will move on to the next question that we received by email from Joy Fraser. This is for Mr. Decker. Are you still exploring the possibility of offering flexible / part-time remote work options post-pandemic for individual staff members who have found that they are both more productive and benefit from a better work-life balance working from home?
Thank you, Megan. And I guess, as I said earlier, yes, we will be exploring that once we get through this initial set of, I guess, projects and evaluation. So hopefully we can move on. As I say, I think remote work has tremendous benefits for university and for individuals. It's just a matter of us getting there, I guess. And before I finish, could I just send a little shout out to our custodians, who I understand some are gathered in lecture theaters today watching this. Hello, I miss you guys walking around on my rounds.
Yes, absolutely. We all so much appreciate the work that they do every day, and certainly being on campus as we're in level 5 lockdown, it's very much appreciated. And hopefully we'll all be back soon to be with them. Don't know why I just muted myself. My next question is for Dr. Abrahams. Why does Memorial limit salaries of work terms for students? They restrict employers not to pay students more than a specific amount, no matter what the student is doing in their job. This is disappointing.
And I have to admit, I'm not aware of this restriction on pay, so I don't have the answer to that question. So that's one that I'll have to do my research and come back with an answer at a later time.
All right, we will follow up on that one after this event. Our next question is for Dr. Timmons from Marlise Rise. She's wondering if there's an update on the position of Vice Provost, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion.
Well, I'll actually punt that question over to the Provost.
Thank you, Dr. Timmons. Yes, I chair that committee. The committee is continuing its work and hopes to make a public announcement within the next several weeks.
Wonderful, thank you. The next question or comment comes in from Rhea Rollman, and it does touch on something that Mr. Decker was speaking about earlier, but I think it's important to talk about because I know it's something that's on so many people's minds. They say that the Back to Campus initiative in January was a bad idea. What assurance can you give that there won't be a repeat of the Back to Campus and that folks who have been working remotely will be able to continue working remotely until vaccination?
So I'm going to, before Ken speaks, I want to say something. You know, it's kind of like when they called the election. We had very few cases and we couldn't predict the future. I'm not sure it was a bad idea. I think it was the best idea, that it was the best decision we made with the information that we had at the time. And I do want to, acknowledge how generous of spirit people have been, recognizing that when you make a decision on the best information you have, sometimes you can look back and think, well, was there any other indication that would have told us not to make that decision? And I would say there wasn't at the time. And we had to move quickly, and you moved quickly after we had to go into a level 5. And I want to thank you for that. And people have been, remember kindness? People have been generous of spirit about that. I know it was frustrating. I know it was difficult. But you were kind and recognized how we can predict the future. So I want to thank everyone on this call for that. And then I'll let Kent speak.
Actually, very similar to my comments. I think it was the right decision at the time based on the information we had. I know a lot of people wanted to get back on campus and we're looking forward to it. And people I did meet and talk to were generally happy to be there. So I think it was the right decision. However, looking back on it, things changed. Things were changing that we weren't aware of at the time. Neither was public health. Obviously, we are guided by public health and work with them when we make our decisions. We set up the campus in a way that was safe for people to come back to. I had no concerns around that. We did learn that after the fact that the one of the variants was spreading in the community. Again, we acted quickly to move back to an off-campus situation, even before it was declared, I guess, a lockdown by public health. So in the future, we will be guided by public health. That's how we operate. We work with them very closely. We seek advice from them, and we ensure that if we have people back on campus, it is safe and we are following the proper guidelines. In terms of what happens in the future, we don't know. But the way things are going with alert levels and vaccinations, I think we'll be in a bit of a different situation in terms of immunity in the population when we get back. I think that's the nature of sort of where we are right now. So I'll just end it there.
And Shane Regular has kind of a different take on the same topic. He says, hello, some staff who are working from home are struggling with this model. Why can't staff who have their own office access their office freely, similar to faculty members with their own office? Mr. Decker, can you take that one?
Well, right now we're in level 5, and essentially the advice from public health is stay at home unless you have to go out for something that's essential. Don't leave your house. Stay home. Maybe once a week to go to grocery store, to the pharmacy, or whatever. So we are supporting public health by having, I guess, a process in place where you have to have essentially a written approval to go on campus. That's the situation we're in right now. Again, we will work closely with public health as we go forward. We do know there are people who are struggling, and we will do everything we can to get people back on campus when they want to or need to. I know there are some situations where it is quite important that people get back to campus, and rest assured we will do whatever we can to accommodate that.
We had a comment come in as well from Penny Blackwood, who said, I was very happy to go back to campus. Who could have predicted what happened next? And so let me just scooch back over into my questions. Mark Berry says, regarding the workday and time expectations, many faculty and students feel that this is a long-standing issue, not just a pandemic issue that directly impacts EDI and mental health. What will be done to address this rather than just returning to normal? Dr. Timmons, did you want to take that question?
Yeah, we've been speaking about that quite a bit and trying to think about ways to support our faculty and staff. And I will get the provost to speak about promotion and tenure, because I think that is really important. And we do know from the statistics that many of our young faculty members, in particular our young female faculty members with children at home, it's been really tough for them in terms of getting the level of research and being able to accomplish what they would have accomplished without a pandemic. And the provost, there is a plan around that, around promotion and tenure. Do you want to speak to that, Mark?
Sure. So this issue came up actually at the last time we did a staff town hall. And certainly when it comes to promotion and tenure files this year, absolutely, we're going to be keeping a very close eye on this to find out if there is any EDI issues associated with success or failure. For faculty going through the promotion and tenure process. I think the bigger issue, to be perfectly honest, is not for faculty's application for tenure. I think the process that we have at this university is very proactive in terms of providing lots of opportunity for feedback, so that most faculty who apply for tenure are normally successful. I think the bigger issue is going to be faculty that are applying for promotion to full professor. So that's where the lag effect is. That's where success rates are much lower. And certainly I think a plan needs to be put into place to ensure that the consequences associated with the pandemic don't have a long-lasting impact that is going to jeopardize somebody's career.
Thank you. I've seen some people repeat their questions. I can see all the questions that are coming in. It's just we have more than we can get to. You don't need to send it more than once. We will try our very best to get to all of them in the order in which they're sent in or as the conversation permits. One related comment to our transition to work from home and back again, Francesca Borchetti said, our leaders' response when they sent us back at home when the situation changed was very quick. Thank you to our leaders for ensuring we stay and keep each other safe. And next question I have, if my computer would cooperate. Gerald Singh says, COVID stress, including work from home, affects visible minorities, women, and LGBTQ+ individuals more often because of issues such as gender norms, socioeconomic status, etc. How are these concerns considered in strategy, hiring, grants, and accommodations? And because the question is so broad, I'm going to throw it open to anyone of our panelists to respond to their area.
Maybe I'll begin and then Mark. So generally, I've been involved nationally in a number of groups that are looking at this. There's a whole group called the Prosperity Project that just released a report called the Zero Report, taking a look in particular around gender differences. I'm also involved with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce on a group that is looking at this. So we haven't seen, it's really hard to do tangible things to support people in many ways. So this is one where I'll say I'd love to go and fix this, but my biggest job right now is to really listen and learn and try to figure out ways that we can support it. We know, as Mark said, what we can do around tenure and promotion, and we are looking at that. In other areas, it's just we want to make sure people have support and can get help and feel okay reaching out. Mark, do you have specifics you want to say about this?
Well, I think I would add that really our approaches and strategies to equity, diversity, and inclusion are still very much in their infancy. I mean, we are taking some of the obvious steps, such as unconscious bias training associated with hiring committees, but still there's much, much more that we can do. I'm placing tremendous hope in a vice provost, equity, diversity, and inclusion, because I think that's it's something that we desperately need at this university, and I'm hoping that the person in that role can take us to a better place to address many of the issues that come up in this question.
We also, in terms of hiring, you've asked about hiring. Our search committees, we look at diversity on the search committees. We're looking at diversity in the client pool that comes forward, and if it's not demonstrated, then we return it. We've also taken to the board on Thursday a motion to participate in the 50-30 challenge from the federal government that's looking at all our governance practices and advisory boards. So I know the EDI work is will be led by the AVP in EDI, but it is going to be all of our responsibilities. And I want to make sure that everyone here on this call knows that it will be, we'll be looking at everything we can through that lens of equity as we go forward. Mark, do you want to mention the Indigenous cluster hire? That might be helpful for people.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, one of the first tangible steps that we're taking with respect to our indigenization strategy are the cluster hires. So this is a competition for 5 faculty positions at Memorial University. That process is still underway. This is a brand new process for Memorial University, so it's taking longer than I would like it to take. But it is following the advice and the guidance of the President's committee on President's Advisor on Indigenous Affairs, and so we're working with that group as well as the Elders Council to guide us through this process.
Dr. Bose, it looked like you had your hand up.
Yes, I will just make a short comment around the grants and awards and that side of things. One of the things that we need to do is ensure that we have information about past performance, and I know Gerald knows this because he's involved in the process. So that's part of the situation, and then knowing how we are doing, we can put in place, or we can attempt to put in place measures to change the future and practices into the future. So the cluster hire is one of those. The targeted hiring for potential targeted hiring for positions is another issue, and being aware at the grant selection committees and so on, and having procedures in place, which our research advisory committee, which Gerald's involved with, is part of the way forward.
Thank you. And a question just came in from Charlene Walsh on this topic, so I'm going to hop over to that question now. She says, will a similar hiring process regarding curriculum specialists to support indigenization of courses and programs be considered in the framework developed for EDI supports for faculties and schools regarding program development and review revision? Dr. Abrahams, are you able to answer that question?
Yeah, so I don't have an actual answer for that, because we have yet to fill the position and to know exactly what supports are going to be provided, whether it's going to follow a model similar to the indigenization strategy or exactly how it is we're planning to proceed. So at this time, I don't have an answer for that question.
Okay, thank you. And getting back to the conversation we were having earlier about work hours and things coming in the evening. Toby Rose says, I enjoy the ability to work in the evening. We can spend time with our children at lunch or after school and still put in a full work day. Even if we are back on campus, I enjoy the flexibility. It decreases my stress level. Mr. Decker, did you want to comment on that from sort of a HR perspective?
Well, I guess what I would say is that flexibility is very important. To the extent it can be accommodated, I think is something we should strive to do. Obviously, there are certain roles where it can't work that way, depending on the nature of the work and whether you have to be on campus to do it. However, I do believe there are many opportunities to provide more flexibility. I know as an employer, the university is more flexible than pretty well anywhere else I've ever worked, to be honest. But I still believe there are additional things we could do.
Does anyone else have a comment on this area?
I would encourage people, if that is the case, that make sure they let their supervisor or manager know that that is how they're accommodating the work hours, and I would encourage the leaders to support that. If children are at home during the day, it's I think it is important that if you have a chance to spend some time with them and you can do work in the evening, that you do so. Like, I'm just going to echo what Ken said, but I will say that communication and allowing people to know that will be important.
One thing that I noticed Dr. Gavin Watson did earlier in the pandemic was he had in his email signature that he was working unusual work hours, and that just because he might be sending an email after hours, he wasn't expecting a response until someone started their own. So I think being really overt and acknowledging the flexibility, and that just because you're sending something at 8 p.m. doesn't mean you expect people to be responding in those hours is a good way to help people set those boundaries.
I think that's a very important comment, Megan. So I think people are working different hours and communicating at different hours. And that may be inadvertently create an expectation that people respond at all different hours. So something, I really like the idea of what Gavin did there. I think that's really important.
So I'm going to make a statement now to the Vice President. You don't have to respond. When I call you after 8 at night or 5 in the morning, you can wait during the normal work days. So make sure you know that. So you always respond, I will say that.
Although if it's a snow morning, you need to answer your phone once we're back.
I do, and Ann Brown, make sure I answer. She's great.
Our next question comes from Sherry Roberts. She says, can you speak to the viability, if any, of international work / co-op or internship placements for fall 2021? I assume we are not promoting it in the spring, but is there a possibility for fall? Dr. Abrahams?
You're asking me to predict the future. I hope so, but I can't say for certain.
Thank you. The next question comes in from Paul Ryan. He says, the Marine Institute has greatly increased its academic programming into graduate degrees and PhDs in the last 10 years, yet the campus has no academic freedom, no collegial leadership at the school level, and no faculty. Can you explain this?
So I'm going to just speak to the academic freedom piece, because the Marine Institute is Memorial University and there is academic freedom. And so I want to make that clear for our academic colleagues. In terms of the historical way that people have been with different unions, I don't have the background that goes way back at why those decisions were made. But it is different at the Marine Institute. I don't know if Glenn is on the call, or Mark, if you want to speak to that.
I checked earlier and I don't think that Glenn was there. I don't know if there's an issue with his connection. So Dr. Abraham, did you have a comment there?
I can't really comment on the detailed operation of the Marine Institute. It did opt to go with a somewhat different model than the rest of Memorial University with respect to the appointments, the academic appointments. So they're not within the faculty association, they're within another bargaining unit. But beyond that, I really can't comment.
And Mark, I think that happened when it merged with Memorial University. So it's a long-standing historical.
No, it's actually it's not that long ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Then see, I'm going to educate myself on this. I will get on it. Kent, do you have anything in the history?
My understanding was when the Marine Institute became part of Memorial in 1992, I think it was, that the faculty union there came with them, which is normal. That's what would normally happen. Before then, the Marine Institute was part of the, I guess, the college system as opposed to the university. So the unions, which is named, came with them.
Thank you. Next question is for Dr. Abrahams from Lindsay Alcock. She says, if fall classes will be primarily online, how does the university plan to deal with students returning from across the country and around the world to attend classes, stay in residence, etc.? I think there might have been a typo there. If fall classes will be primarily in person.
Yeah, I think the question was primarily on campus. So again, we are at the mercy of public health, but we are, again, having to make some assumptions about how this is going to happen. So we are assuming that travel between provinces will be permitted by the time we get to September. Again, the information that we're getting on vaccination rates is that all adults who would want to be vaccinated now appear to have that option before we would start the fall term in September. So if that pans out as we are being told, then I would assume the restrictions on interprovincial travel should not be as they currently are. International travel, of course, is another issue altogether. And so we can only work with the guidance provided to us by the federal government. But we are hopeful that those travel restrictions will be eased. Probably our bigger issue is not so much the travel issue, but the issuing of student visas to our international students. So we're going to need to get that resolved also.
Megan, I will mention that I did get a note from Glenn Blackwood that he's on YouTube, so he's unable to comment, but encourage the faculty member who brought this up or the person who brought this up to chat with him to go see Glenn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to share a comment that came through that says, Memorial has something that we should all be proud of, and that is the work our EHS, so it's Environmental Health and Safety Department, is doing. As someone who has to come to work on campus during the pandemic, it eases my mind to know about the work that they are doing.
Thank you for whoever said that. That's very true. They are a very dedicated and hardworking group.
Yes, that one came in to the president's email address, so I can't see right now who that came from, but it is absolutely true.
It came from Renee Fitzgerald. I can see.
She in your office sent it over to us from
sent it to
her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so getting back over into the questions now. Michael Seymour said that with regard to the upper limit for work term students that we're discussing earlier, I think an upper limit was set so the companies who could afford high pay wouldn't always take the best students. At U of T, we could only get the second choice work term students as we couldn't match the pay of private industry, but after the 2008 economic crash, we were able to get the best. That's just a follow-up to that question. Daniel Boyce says, why is Memorial still allowing during times like this a pass, final, or a fail course policy? Students can have a bad day. Dr. Abrahams, can you speak to that?
So right now, we've always had that in the calendar. So instructors have always had the option to award a pass, fail degree, pass, fail, or a mark in a course, and that's really up to the discretion of the instructor. That's not unique to this academic term.
Thank you. Jennifer Shea says, to support student mental health, I often feel ill-equipped to help beyond referrals to supports. As a university community, could we consider additional training, such as mental health first aid, and expansion of mental health resources beyond those that existed pre-pandemic? Dr. Timmons, did you want to take that?
That's a very good suggestion, and absolutely, you know, we should be considering and doing that. So thank you for that. We'll make sure that we let our counseling services know that that's a suggestion that, and when we want to support.
Susan Fudge has a comment about how we send emails. She tries her best to put rules on her emails. She sends it, but the rule she sets up only sends it during the day. Of course, there are exceptions, but this is a general rule I strive to follow.
Again, that's a great idea. I think in Microsoft Office, you can set it up, or Outlook, that your email goes the following day. So I think if you are sending emails at night, I would encourage people absolutely use that function.
Dr. Bose, did you just raise your hand? Yes.
Yes, a comment I would make, slightly humorous, is that I did do that in my previous job, and the people I was working with didn't always appreciate receiving 30 emails all in one go at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. So it can backfire sometimes.
That's very true. Shannon Lewis Simpson said, I see an opportunity for Memorial to be an even more important employer throughout rural Newfoundland and Labrador, therefore fulfilling in part our special obligation to place, stimulating research and reducing infrastructure pressures and costs on main campus.
That's an excellent point. And we've been, having discussions. We had a discussion with a number of tech companies that have been looking at that. So you're absolutely right. There is the opportunity for us to look at that.
Renee let us know that it was Penny Kennedy who had those kind words to say about environmental health and safety. So thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Penny. Absolutely.
I think I've actually gotten through most of the questions that have been submitted. Now, if anyone has any that they would like to get in quickly under the wire, we have just about 10 minutes left to our meeting. And while we're waiting for that, Dr. Timmons just unmuted, so I think she might have something.
Yeah, I'm just very interested in, Megan, if this is helpful for our staff. We have 447 who are online. The town halls, I always like to check in with everyone and say, is this helpful? I don't know if you had a poll on that. Did you, Megan?
The last question that I have ready to go is an open-ended question to see if this was useful for you so that folks could sort of share their feedback with us. Now, we won't share the results of that on screen because we want to protect everyone's privacy, but we will take those in and look at them. And certainly if you don't find it to be useful, you can let us know that too. I know I didn't set up the question in a very rigorous way from an academic standpoint. And you can also send me email comments after. I'd be happy to take those in and do anything that we can to improve these events for everybody. A question from Lisa Moore who says, is there a plan to expand the Indigenous cluster hires beyond scholars only to include practitioners and clinical faculty, for example?
Maybe I can speak to that. With equity and diversity, we have to look at our whole workforce, and we have to look at making sure that we have a more representative workforce. So the answer to that question is absolutely yes. We'll be looking at that as we go forward. That would be important. The other thing I want to mention about these town halls, I cannot wait till we do them in person. It is so hard. I don't even get to see your faces. So I will say that, once pandemic is over, I'm hoping that we'll have opportunities to do town halls in person.
Absolutely. And still with this option too, Darcy and I were talking before the event to make sure that everyone can connect no matter where they are. Someone had a comment about their duties being able to be performed remotely. And their manager supports it. And they were just looking for consistency across campus for remote work because they felt as though that wasn't the case. And again, I asked people at the start not to ask about their individual situation, but I do think that this is the type of thing that has come up a few times. So Mr. Decker, did you want to speak to that a little bit? About consistency and how the remote work rules were or are applied?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what we're getting at there because I think, we did organize a number of remote work pilots during the time when we came back. So I'm not exactly sure what we're referring to there. Most people did go home and are set up to work from home based on, I guess, working with their supervisor. I don't know how much variation there is in that in terms of working hours, that kind of thing. But if there is a particular circumstance that is problematic, I would invite you to talk to your supervisor, or if there's something in particular, maybe talk to Human Resources.
Thank you. And a comment came through. A few people chimed up to say that yes, these town halls are helpful. Ashley Cornu said a comment to say thank you to our senior leaders for their ongoing support and leadership during this unpredictable time in our province. I think these town halls are incredibly helpful in learning ongoing information and details around supports and updates. Vanessa Mackey said, during this work at home year, I actually felt the most I ever have felt connected to the university leadership team. Thank you for these town halls. And another question from Victoria Collins, what measures are being considered to prepare the campuses for hybrid learning when some folks attend in person and some virtually? Dr. Abrahams, do you want to take that question?
Sure. So I think really the question of, if I could rephrase the question ever so slightly, is how are we going to benefit from the pandemic? And so how are we going to be able to benefit from the measures that we've taken to get us through the pandemic? And I'm thinking that options like blended learning, where we're using a combination of both on campus and remote teaching, will likely become much more popular. I think prior to the pandemic, if I remember correctly, we had one and only one blended learning course at Memorial University. I expect that number to grow quite dramatically as we go through and take a look at what other options that we can take advantage of, which will make for a better experience both for faculty and students.
Okay, I'm going to give the last question now to Dr. Timmons. Lindsay Alcock said there's a sense that staff were mandated back to work to address optics, that nobody was working, rather than addressing a need to be on campus. Can you respond to this? Now, I should say that Dr. Timmons warned us that she's been having internet connectivity issues at home and that she was hoping that everything would work out. Seems like we've lost her. So I don't know, Dr. Abrahams, did you want to address that question?
So the question was whether return to campus was primarily for optics as opposed to anything.
Or to a need on campus.
Yeah, so really the move to bring people back onto campus was really to bring the campus back to life. The university is only as good as the people that we have. And certainly for me personally, it was an opportunity to actually meet people, have personal interactions with people, obviously from a socially distanced perspective with a mask on, but to have conversations that you can't really have via WebEx. So that created some synergies that you just don't get within this remote learning environment, remote working environment. And that's what we were trying to do by bringing people back onto campus.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to ask Darcy to launch that final poll question now so we can get your feedback about what the most useful part of today's town hall was. Like I said, if you didn't find it useful or if there's something else you want to share, feel free to do that in that field. You do have a minute to answer this question and we'll just leave that open. And now I'll turn it over as well to the panelists to see if anyone has any final thoughts for this event.
I can start. So I really appreciated the comment from the individual who said they felt more connected to Memorial's leadership team during this year than they have in the past year. I will say that sitting on the other side, it's very frustrating not to actually see the people who are asking the questions and have that opportunity for further interaction with individuals. So while I appreciate that this has been very positive for some, I am hoping that our interactions will be even more positive once we get back on campus.
I guess I'd just make the comment that not being on campus makes a huge difference for our roles as leaders. As Mark says, the opportunity to interact is not there. All the informal communications, things that get done by happenstance, the walking the hallways, the talking to people, getting a sense of what's going on in the university, getting the flavor for the morale, getting the flavor for how people are doing, you lose it. You really feel disconnected in a way that I've never felt disconnected before. So it is much more difficult working in this situation. You add on top of that the stresses of the pandemic. It is a tougher work environment. I can understand why people are struggling. I can understand why life is more difficult in general. And I really look forward to a time when we can get back on campus and get on with our lives for those where it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense to be on campus, then let's figure out a way to make that happen.
Yes, I would follow up that it's been a very difficult year for everyone. And the aim of all of us is to try and ensure that as much as possible of our operation has been able to proceed. Some things have been very positive. I would note that being able to connect right across our campuses has improved no end through the pandemic. So there are some good things that have come out. Keeping the research operation running as much as it possibly can has also been very important, and it's obviously a big setback going into lockdown this year in the way we have done, because that's put things on hold again. But we look optimistically at the future as the vaccines get rolled out, and hopefully we will be able to be safely back on campus as much as possible sometime over the summer months.
Thank you, guys. Dr. Timmons just texted me to say that she did lose her connection. She apologized for that. And so I will clue up this event now, say thank you all so much for taking the time to be here with us today. Thank you to our panelists. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye.